Lists are usually trash. Most channels rank for clicks, not truth. Here's our attempt to do this honestly. Top 10 ranked cited. The Renaissance gets sold to you as an age of painters. Frescoes, marble, the slow rediscovery of Greek sculpture. But the artists you've heard of were funded by industries you haven't, and those industries ran on machines we no longer name. Behind every Medici altarpiece was a silver mine. Behind every silver mine was a hoist, a stamp mill, a rolling mill. Behind every cathedral clock was a piece of escaped weight finally trained to behave. This list is not about Da Vinci's notebooks. Most of those drawings never moved a gram of anything. It's about the working iron, brass, and oak machines that actually ran beneath the paintings. We're going to walk up from the bottom of the supply chain to the top, from raw rock to abstract information, and the number one is not the printing press. The argument for what is comes at the end. Top 10 ranked cited. We start at the bottom of the workshop hierarchy because the bottom is where most goods came from. The pole lathe is a foot-treadle wood lathe with a springy sapling or a piece of springy wood lashed overhead. You push the treadle, the cord wrapped around the workpiece spins it one way, the pole snaps it back, and your gouge cuts on the down stroke. That is the entire machine. No water, no animal, no apprentice cranking. One person, one workpiece, one cycle a second. The pole lathe is genuinely old, well predating the Renaissance, but it spread through 15th and 16th century workshops because urban populations were booming, and someone had to make the chair legs, bowls, tool handles, and spindles for an entire continent of new households. Most furniture you can find in a Renaissance painting of an ordinary interior was turned on something like this. It belongs at 10 because it changed nothing in principle. But without it, the rest of the list has nobody to sell to. Now we go underground, or rather beside the river next to the mine shaft. A stamp mill is a row of heavy iron-shod wooden hammers, lifted in sequence by cams on a rotating water wheel shaft and dropped onto ore in a stone trough. Thud, thud, thud all day, sometimes all night. It crushes rock into gravel, gravel into sand, so that silver, copper, or tin can be washed or smelted out. Without it, a miner has to break ore by hand with another hammer, which sets a hard ceiling on how much metal a society can produce. With it, the ceiling lifts by orders of magnitude. The German mining regions in the late 15th and 16th centuries ran on these batteries, and they show up in detail in Agricola's De Re Metallica, published in the mid-16th century, which is still the canonical visual record of what these works actually looked like. Stamp mills are the reason the Habsburg Empire could pay armies in silver. They funded half the cathedrals on this continent. Nobody knows their name. Stamp mills only work if you can get the ore out of the ground. Renaissance mines went deeper than ancient mines, and at depth, two things kill you: water and the weight of what you're trying to lift. The whim is a large horizontal drum on a vertical axle, harnessed to one or two horses walking in a circle. As the horses walk, the drum winds a rope, and the rope hauls buckets, men, or ore up the shaft. Sometimes the same rig drained water through a chain of leather bags. Picture a wooden carousel, except it never stops, and what it carries comes from 100 meters down. The whim, alongside water-powered hoists where streams were available, is the reason mines stopped being shallow scrapes and started being industrial pits. Again, Agricola documents these in detail. Without the whim, the silver doesn't come up. Without the silver, the stamp mill has nothing to break. The whole metals economy of the Renaissance is hanging from this rope. Now the ore is out, smelted, and you have ingots of metal. What do you do with them? Before the rolling mill, you hammered them. A skilled smith with a sledge could produce a sheet slowly, unevenly, expensively. The rolling mill is two heavy iron cylinders, geared together, turning in opposite directions, with a hot metal billet fed between them. Out the other side comes sheet, of more or less consistent thickness, in seconds. The first European versions appear in the 16th century, with Leonardo sketching one variant and working mills emerging in mints and armorers' workshops over the following decades. The two main customers were initially mints, which needed flat strip to punch coins from, and armorers, who needed plate for cuirasses and helmets. Later it would feed the entire pre-industrial sheet metal economy. Pots, pans, roofing, boiler shells, scientific instruments. Every flat piece of metal in your kitchen is descended from this idea. The rolling mill is also the moment when metal stops being shaped one piece at a time and starts being produced as standard stock. Sheet metal is great for plates. It is useless for anything that needs to hold together precisely. For that you need threads, and before the Renaissance, threads were carved by hand, one at a time by eye in soft metal. They never matched. A screw from one workshop would not fit a nut from another. The screw-cutting lathe is a metal-turning lathe with a mechanical link between the rotation of the work and the travel of the cutter, so the tool advances a fixed distance per revolution. The result is a thread of uniform pitch that you can reproduce. Leonardo drew versions of this. Working examples in serious form develop over the 16th and 17th centuries, refined dramatically later. We're not citing Brahma here, who comes much later. We're citing the principle. Once you have repeatable threads, you have repeatable clamps, vices, presses, and eventually, repeatable interchangeable parts. Every machine on this list that uses a screw to hold itself together quietly depends on this. So does every machine that came after. You've made metal, shaped metal, and threaded it. Now we use it to find where we are. The mariner's astrolabe is a heavy brass ring with a sighting arm hanging from a thumb ring. You hold it up against the sun at noon, read the angle, and combine it with a date table to get your latitude. The cross staff, used the same century, does a similar job with a sliding crosspiece on a graduated rod. Neither tool tells you longitude. Both tell you within a degree or so how far north or south you are. That was enough. With latitude, ships could sail to a known parallel and run east or west until they hit land. The Portuguese voyages down the African coast, the transatlantic crossings of the late 15th and 16th centuries, the Indian Ocean trade out of Goa, they all rest on these two simple brass and wood instruments. Without them, you stay coastal. With them, the entire planet becomes addressable. Empires, plantations, ecological catastrophe, and all follow. Now we move from where you are to when you are. A spring is a wonderful power source except for one thing. As it unwinds, it pulls less hard. A clock or watch driven directly by a mainspring runs fast when freshly wound and slow before it stops. The fusee is the fix. It's a small cone-shaped pulley with a spiral groove, wrapped by a chain or gut line connected to the mainspring barrel. When the spring is fully wound and pulling hardest, the chain pulls from the narrow end of the cone, giving the gear train less leverage. As the spring weakens, the chain unwinds onto the wider end, giving more leverage. The net torque delivered downstream is roughly constant. This sounds like a curiosity. It is the reason portable timepieces became accurate enough to use. Without the fusee, spring-driven clocks and watches developed from the 15th and 16th centuries onward would have been ornaments. With it, they became instruments. Every wristwatch, every chronometer, every navigation timekeeper inherits this idea. The fusee makes a spring deliver constant force. The escapement turns that force into ticks. The verge-and-foliot is the earliest mechanical escapement to see wide use, predating the Renaissance and ubiquitous through it. A weight or spring tries to drive a toothed crown wheel. Two small pallets on a vertical rod, the verge, alternately catch and release the wheel's teeth. A horizontal bar at the top of the verge, the foliot, swings back and forth with weights you can slide in or out to tune the rate. Each swing releases one tooth. Tick, tick, tick. The clock counts swings. It's not very accurate, drifting minutes a day, eventually replaced by pendulum escapements in the 17th century. But that's not the point. The point is that this is the first widely deployed feedback machine in human history. A continuous energy source is regulated by a self-resetting oscillator into discrete countable events. Every digital circuit, every CPU clock, every metronome, every regulated machine in the modern world is a descendant of that swinging bar. You expected the printing press. The press itself is not interesting. It is a screw press, a design borrowed almost directly from olive and wine presses that had existed for centuries. What changes everything in the mid-15th century is not the press. It is the type. To print a book, You need thousands of small metal letters that are dimensionally identical to the thousandth of an inch, cast in the millions, in a metal soft enough to take ink, hard enough to survive thousands of impressions and shrinking predictably as it cools. The solution is a punch matrix mold system. A hardened steel punch, cut with a single letter in reverse, strikes a softer copper blank to make a matrix. The matrix drops into an adjustable hand mold. Molten lead tin antimony alloy is poured in. A perfect letter pops out, every time, identical. The skills, alloys, and discipline came directly from contemporary metalworking trades, including coin minting and small arms casting. The printing revolution is really a metallurgy revolution wearing a wooden frame. Number 1 is a machine so small you have probably never noticed it as a machine. A crank is a bent shaft. A connecting rod is a stick with a pivot at each end. Together, they convert continuous rotation into reciprocating linear motion, or the reverse. That is all they do. The Renaissance did not invent the crank from nothing. Hand cranks existed in late antiquity, and the connecting rod appears in earlier water-powered installations. But it is in the 15th and 16th centuries that the full crank and connecting rod linkage spreads across European workshops, driving sawmills, bellows, water pumps, mechanical hammers, and treadle-powered tools of every kind. The reason this is number 1 is downstream. Every piston steam engine has a crank and a connecting rod. Every internal combustion engine in every car on the road has one for every cylinder. Every reciprocating pump, every loom, every sewing machine, every oil derrick. The Industrial Revolution is in many ways the story of feeding bigger and bigger energy sources into this one linkage. Without the crank, rotation and linear motion live in separate worlds, and machines stay small. The Renaissance is the moment they're permanently joined. So that's the argument. The Renaissance you were sold is paintings. The Renaissance that actually built the next 4 centuries is a workshop. Rock comes up the shaft, hammers crush it, rollers flatten it, lathes thread it, brass instruments locate it, springs and swinging bars time it, punches multiply it, and one bent shaft with a stick on it ties rotation to linear motion forever. The art on the walls was paid for in the end by these machines. If you'd rank these differently, the comments are open. Bring evidence. Until next time.